What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ryan, and this is the Thunder Channel on Nootropics. I'm in full Jesus mode today with a sty on my left eye. I've been getting styes since I was a kid. They're super annoying, but warm compresses help. Going to do another Nootropics beginner series, and this is going to be on TEACRINE. TEACRINE is an extremely versatile chemical that is useful in a variety of ways. We're going to get to that. In the meantime, what supports this broadcast is a couple nootropic products. Number one, the Cortex Nootropic Stack. Been around for 6 years, mainly used by productive people and entrepreneurs, but anybody that wants brain performance on cue, get Cortex. You can either buy it singularly or do auto ship, which is the best option for Cortex. Gets you one of the most epic pre-made nootropic stacks shipped to your doorstep every month for cheaper than the original price. Do Cortex auto ship at livecortex.com. If you're new to nootropics, Nootropics Ground Zero. It's a video course that I created for people that are new. Shows you the ropes, gives you stacks, gives you basically an entire framework to use nootropics properly. 6 years in, use the Nootropics Masterclass if you want to ascend to that level. That's another video course. If you're a guy that has to raise testosterone, Viking Testosterone Protocol. It's upgraded now, including dietary intervention. Very, very effective for raising test for guys. Lastly, if you're a business person or otherwise productive person that just needs to be on point 80 to 90% of the time and you want to double or triple your productivity, work with me. I promise this is what I do, and we can fully optimize your brain to the point where you're like, I never want to go back. Like, I'm performing so amazingly. Either work with me for 3.5 months or 6 months. These are intensive one-on-one biohacking programs where we use nootropics, research chemicals, supplements, everything at our disposal to fully optimize your performance. Get all that stuff at livecortex.com. So reading from my notes, let's just talk about the about of TEACRINE. The most primarily popular compound where TEACRINE can be found, where it's synthesized, is in kucha tea. Kucha tea. It's sort of like a stimulant-esque, I think it's a Japanese drink or something. Kucha tea. There's TEACRINE in kucha tea. What it is a purine alkaloid, okay, which is a chemical derived from plants. Caffeine, nicotine, and even cocaine are other examples of purine alkaloids, just to give you some context. What ultimately happens on like growing plants that make TEACRINE is at the point where the plants are strictly caffeine, they undergo a chemical change, if you will, which is really just adding, I believe, one single chemical group to the caffeine molecule that yields TEACRINE. So it's basically caffeine that's accumulating in a plant, and then at some point it undergoes a chemical change which turns it into TEACRINE by adding one chemical group to the caffeine molecule. If you look at the molecules side by side, they're very similar. And then TEACRINE has one additional molecule to it. Mechanism of action. TEACRINE acts as a competitive inhibitor of the adenosine receptors, right? Sounds pretty familiar when you compare it to caffeine. That's its primary mode of action. It's also thought, though, to act on other neurotransmitter systems, both acetylcholine and dopamine. But to what extent, we really don't understand. What it looks like is it's enhancing dopamine neurotransmission in the nucleus accumbens. I mean, that is on paper, which is mediated probably through dopamine receptors, certain dopamine receptors. Effects. So what all this leads to, what does all this mean? In the end, what TEACRINE does to me and most people that take it and find the right dose is it gives you enhanced wakefulness. So like if you're tired and groggy and don't really feel like working, it should change that and put you in a place where you're like awake and wanting to work. Alertness and a noticeable bump above baseline in terms of motivation and drive to do things. That is more than likely the dopaminergic side of things, again mediated by dopamine receptor function and neurotransmission in the nucleus accumbens, dopamine neurotransmission, that is. So personal motivation and personal drive and wakefulness. That's why it's a cool compound, because if you think about like what we try to achieve with taking nootropics, aside from enhanced processing and memory, it's really that, right? Wakefulness, energy, personal drive, motivation to do stuff. Singularly, it's one of the best nootropics out there, because a lot of nootropics, like, you probably want to stack them with other things. This has an incredible profile by itself. Anecdotally, it basically just kicks me into gear. It's in a mild stimulant kind of way, but which lacks typical stimulant characteristics. Like, it doesn't get me unfocused because too much stimulation certainly gets me unfocused. It's like difficult for me to actually zone in. I'm sort of all over the place. It's easier to multitask in that particular situation. Makes me want to start my day. Like I may have a little lag period in the beginning of the day where I'm like procrastinating essentially before I actually start doing work or productive things. TEACRINE basically takes care of that. And you know, in terms of a time frame, it gives me about 3 to 4 hours of good solid work, right? To just sort of sit down and do things. And it synergizes with a lot of other nootropics. It's not just epic by itself. You can stack it with other things. Dose range. The dose range on TEACRINE is 20 to 250 milligrams. Okay, some people respond, again, better to lower doses, and some people just require higher doses based on their particular brain makeup. You want to always start low if you're experimenting with it. First, initially, like you've never taken it before, start at 20 and then see how you feel, and then move yourself up in like 20 milligram increments ultimately to find your highest tolerable dose. That's the dose at which you get great effects, but anything more than that dose will give you some sort of side effect, like overstimulation or just a lack of focus or to sort of make you feel strange. And you'll actually have to go to that dose, you know, the dose at which you get side effects to figure that out, and then you just go slightly below that to find your highest tolerable dose. The effect duration window is typically 2 to 4 hours for people. That's most folks. I have heard people say, people that I'm working with, people that I might be talking to on the web about nootropics, that like 5 or 6 hours later, they're still more energized than usual, and they actually have the energy to do work later on in the evening where they usually don't. That is probably the TEACRINE having some sort of effect on adenosine and dopamine. Stacks best with, it stacks with a lot of things, but this is what it stacks best with: dynamine, aniracetam, modafinil, oxiracetam, phenylpiracetam, and acetyl L-carnitine. Those are the chemicals that TEACRINE stacks best with, that I've been able to sort of formulate the best combinations with. Now, there's plenty of other things that it stacks with, like the usual suspects in the roster of nootropics that we typically talk about, but you got to be, I would say a little more surgical on your dosing when you're stacking it with other things besides those compounds. It is water soluble, so you don't need to like take it with fish oil or olive oil or fat or something for it to like, you know, have a slightly more potent effect, which is ultimately what that ends up being when you've got fat soluble stuff. It's not going to make or break the effect, but it's water soluble, so you don't really have to worry about that. Should be cycled just for good measure. Four times weekly is probably max what I would suggest taking it. These days, I mean, it's hard to really say because I switch between stacks and then I'll cycle off for a week or two. It depends, but I probably use TEACRINE like twice a week, I think, in my stacks. That's kind of an average for me. What is it though? An overall useful tool for jolting the brain into working, adding some wakefulness, and getting the user to just want to start tasks, stuff that they have to do, just like wanting to start being productive. That's what TEACRINE's awesome for. So hope that makes sense. Thanks so much for watching. That has been another Nootropics Beginner Series on TEACRINE. Extremely versatile, very useful tool to have in the arsenal. And I'm glad you're with me for me to explain it. Guys, go support the broadcast #1 Cortex Nootropic Stack. Better yet, auto ship. That is our most popular product at this point. There's so many people that are doing it because look, you get for cheaper the Epic Cortex Nootropic Stack shipped to your doorstep automatically every month. You'll never run out of it, and you always have it as a side. Like that's the important thing about pre-made stacks or a good formulation. You always have it if you need it, right, in the mix. You can stack it with oxiracetam, you can stack it with caffeine, you can stack it with B vitamins, DHA. It synergizes extremely well with all those things. Stacking it with phenylpiracetam works pretty well. Stacking it with modafinil will really, really turn your brain on to some insane extent if you want to work for 10 hours. Get AutoShip, livecortex.com. If this video resonated with you, meaning you're new to nootropics, you have to start with Nootropics Ground Zero. You will thank me later. Get that at livecortex.com. Last thing, yeah, we've got some slots open for 3.5 months and 6-month options. Those are where you work with me on a one-on-one basis using nootropics, research chemicals, supplements, everything we have at our disposal to fully optimize your energy baseline, your hormonal profile, everything that contributes to energy, and then brain performance. The type of productivity and difference in people's lives and output that these consults make is substantial. 3.5 months or 6 months, you can find that at livecortex.com. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Talk to you next time.